Welcome back. Let's now get into our panel, which looks at the big stories of the past 7 days. Joining us is Wits School of Governance's Professor Alex van den Heever, Business Day journalist Sinesipho Schrieber, and political analyst Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening as we unpack the big stories of the week. Sinesipho, you're with us in studio, so I'd perhaps start with you. And of course, the Madlanga Commission has been one that we've seen some explosive testimonies coming out of that, one definitely being from the suspended EMPD head, Mr. Mapiyeye, and he was just speaking there about some of those rogue elements that exist within EMPD. And I think really what stood out for a lot of people is that SWAT team that operated under Brigadier Mkhwanazi that was terrorizing, I mean, from the theft, the murder, the defeating the ends of justice. What does this reveal about the challenges of police accountability and institutional integrity, especially when you look at an entity such as EMPD?
A very good evening, Katlego. I mean, it was one of those testimonies that were mind-blowing to listen to in the Madlanga Commission. During the month of September into the early of October, we were listening in the Madlanga Commission of the criminal infiltration into the SAPS. We moved quickly into EMPD, and it's one of the most shocking testimonies out of there. The dysfunctionality of that department, the infiltration of criminals in that department, depicted by Ovusumuzi Matlala's cars being registered under the metro, taxpayers paying for his license fees, and then fraudulent memorandums to sort of seal this unlawful relationship between EMPD and an attempted murder accused. It is quite shocking for South Africans, and it really paints the picture of the scope of what the Madlanga Commission is dealing with, which is in criminal infiltration. If you listen to Commissioner Mapiyeye's evidence, you will see it depicting what criminal infiltration is, and that's what happened there. If those allegations are proved to be true, it is really what the Madlanga Commission chair, the retired justice, says we are doomed as a country. It is a systematic collapse of that department. Yes.
Prof. Breakfast, I mean, when we looked at some of those testimonies, particularly that of Commissioner Spies at the Madlanga Commission, and the videos that we watched, which they were able to pull from Kat Matlala's wife's Instagram page, and it being captioned there, driven by blue lights, Mama Cat and her cubs. I mean, really, what picture does this paint for South Africans that this really is happening under our watch in this country?
Yeah, I think now we can see which way the wind is blowing in terms of the evidence that has been presented, that the security apparatus or the security architecture has been captured or has been affected by criminality. And I think the rationale behind the Madlanga Commission was to uncover the truth regarding, the criminal activities which embed themselves in the security apparatus. And I just hope that when all is said and done, the findings will be operationalized so that we can really totally overhaul the operations and the practices which are entrenched in the security apparatus.
Prof. van den Heever, I mean, we heard there about these high-ranking individuals that were protecting some of these rogue elements that were happening within the EMPD. Chief or former suspended Chief Mapiyeye spoke there about the city manager, the head of legal, the head of HR, who he on continuous basis went there pleading for some kind of assistance or just an ear. What does that say to us with regards just those internal workings of such an entity as the EMPD that would protect criminality as opposed to what they're actually there for?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that this is not unique, is that this is essentially what is being alleged with the rest of the South African police services as well as the links into political structures. So when you start to look at the pattern, what you're seeing is that there is an imbalance in that the policing structures are very susceptible to these relationships with criminal networks. And these criminal networks are therefore able to get the police to be deployed to protect them rather than to protect society. And we're seeing it systematically. So we're seeing it across the board. And the question is, how far and how high does it go? Because the implication is that we have this in the Hawks, that we have this in the South African police services, we have this in the municipal police services. And the fact that it's across the board is very concerning. And there are accusations that even in the NPA, that we've got a potential influence. So, and that still has to be completely unraveled. So this is a real concern. It means that many of our most important systemic crimes, that's the crimes where people are coordinated and involve complex crimes, they are not being properly, they're easily basically dismantled through bribery and corruption, and that the police end up protecting the crooks rather than protecting us.
Sinesipho, I mean, the head of EMPD also spoke about certain threats that they got from the city manager, and this was to himself and Commissioner Spies, because the city manager was saying that it seemed as though they were the ones enforcing this narrative that Brigadier Mkhwanazi had things to answer to. And this threat was about Mswazi, which we believe would be Mswazi, who is the former Pretoria taxi boss that has now subsequently passed away. And the threat was that they would call this Inkabi on these two police heads. What is this? Is this prevalent do you think, in South Africa's fight against crime, as well as police using their abuse in that particular way, or people within politics using their abuse where we'd even get to a point of inciting violence in that manner?
Those are quite chilling threats against the head of police, of EMPD, sort of communicated by the city manager, the former city manager, Imogen Mashazi. And being told, firstly, we deal with the infiltration of the executive, because this is the city manager telling my PA that there is going to be a hit on you, dare push for disciplinary. And that's quite chilling. It's quite prevalent in South Africa. We will think of the person who was investigating the Mdlalose Tavern case, that police officer that was killed, Gavin Mdlovu. You will think of the person who blew the whistle at QTech, and then Armand Swart was killed. You will think of Babita. Babita blew the whistle on the Tembisa hospital, and she was killed. So the message is, dare push for anti-corruption, dare push for some kind of disciplinary. You will face the bullet and you will leave your family. And that's quite chilling. Very chilling, extremely chilling. I mean, Prof. Breakfast, Prof. Heever spoke there about the potential influence of the NPA in some of this infiltration. And we heard how Head Mapieye was speaking about a Hawks member who was supposed to be investigating the case against Brigadier Mkhwanazi, now having secret meetings with Mkhwanazi. Where do we run to when organizations and agencies such as the Hawks and IPID could possibly then also be involved in some of this criminality?
Well, definitely this poses a threat to the national security, but also to human security. But also, I think it leads to distrust between the citizens and the government of the day, in particular the security officers. Hence, I've been arguing that there is a need to really make a change for the better after these investigations have been concluded, so that people can begin to trust, men and women in uniform, so that the country can, be seen to be doing something in terms of fighting corruption.
Prof. Heever, what would that change for the better look like?
Well, we have to look very carefully at how leadership structures are selected within the South African police services and the protection of the independence of these structures. It's important to note that if we look at what's happening today, if we went back 15, 20 years, after we've had the introduction of essentially cadre deployment as an official mechanism that has been utilized by a political party, that it effectively became possible for people behind the scenes to appoint networks of people that they wish to have in public office. And this includes the commissioners of police, the NPA, SARS, etc. And that basically allows the closing down of the accountability mechanisms of the whole country. And we're having this discussion today. We didn't have this discussion adequately when the Scorpions were shut down. And the Scorpions were shut down as a form of obstruction of justice because there were criminal cases that they were pursuing against senior members of government who were implicated in corruption. And that's the reason the Scorpions were shut down. And there was a clamor to have the Scorpions shut down. So when we see what's happening now, it is versions of the same thing that are happening, except that the machinery that is in place permits a form of systemic conflict of interest between people who are in a position to influence what's going on, to benefit from extraction of resources from the state, and to divert the attention of society and the investigative structures from investigating and prosecuting those very cases. So this is the stuff that we have to correct. So it means creating an independent structure. It's not good enough just to call people independent. You have to be structurally independent. Being structurally independent means that you have to look at how people are nominated, appointed, and removed into these various structures. We haven't looked at that. We allow conflicts of interest in that structure, and that means that it allows for what we are seeing. So I think that this is a very important conversation. What do we do now? When we go forward, we have to go to the root cause. The root cause is influencing these appointments, and we see it all the way through. And it basically places whistleblowers in very, very difficult positions because the power structures are completely, there's an imbalance between them and the power structures in place. You are very vulnerable. And so we have to take this moment in South Africa very seriously and change the system, so that we don't have what is essentially a systemic protection of criminals, and when our state is basically being restructured to benefit the few against the many.
Right. We also saw the acting Minister of Police appear before the ad hoc committee this past week, Professor Khatshaliya. And Professor Khatshaliya, within his testimony, what sort of stood out for many South Africans was his non-approval of Commissioner Mkhwanazi using the regalia that he did during that July 6 briefing, and also just how he was putting out the information that he did on that July 6 media briefing, as opposed to taking certain channels for it. In hindsight, with everything that we now know, because of what happened during that July 6 briefing and all the testimonies that we're seeing in both the commission and the committees, what do you think of the acting minister's stance of how things were done on July 6 as opposed to what we are currently seeing?
Professor Khatshaliya is a man who has studied the law. For him, his analysis of Mkhwanazi's camouflage, the regalia that which he wore, he saw it as problematic. But also he balanced that with saying that he should be a whistleblower that needs to be protected. So he has an independent mind. His opinion is that he does not agree that he should have worn that regalia. But I do not think the essence of his evidence that he is against whistleblowing. Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick ad break. We are also looking to hear from you at home with regards to your questions, comments for our panel, as well as give us your calls right here on the late edition. Please stay with us. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. We are still talking about our big stories of the past 7 days. Joining us is Wits School of Governance, Professor Alex van den Heever, business day journalist Sinesipho Schrieber, as well as political analyst Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast. So, Professor Breakfast, before we took our break, we were talking about Professor Khatshaliya appearing before the ad hoc committee. I'm just interested in getting to know what you made of his evidence in chief and just his responses to some of those members of parliament with regards to the supposed infiltration within SAPS and the criminal justice system.
Yeah, with regard to the posture of General Mkhwanazi, I think the minister was in pain. My interpretation of what he said is that what had happened should not have happened, because he was saying that under normal circumstances you can't be in camouflage as a police officer, as a general, because you have a national a commissioner, and therefore you can't break ranks and unveil that kind of information without the knowledge of your line manager. I assume that it's the national commissioner. Of course, I think the powers that be have been very careful in terms of how they manage the whole situation, given the fact that when General Mkhwanazi broke the news or broke ranks, I think he got the buy-in from the public, because people have been seeing that, security officers are letting us down, and that there is this corrupt relationship between senior security officers, police officers, and criminals. And therefore, I think it would have been unwise to suspend General Mkhwanazi. But my interpretation is that the minister was not impressed with his conduct in terms of stepping up to the plate and addressing the nation.
Prof. Heever, also we saw Advocate Andrea Johnson, who's the head of IDAC, appearing at the ad hoc committee this week. What did you make of her evidence? And did it shape the public's perception of political integrity and corruption in South Africa?
Well, I first want to just comment on the minister's presentation, just to state that I think that Makumazi was a whistleblower, and he was taking what could be regarded as an ethical decision to make this information known to the general public so that something seriously could be done. And his spectacular method of presenting the matter has ensured that it is taken seriously. And even though he could have considered alternative fora, it might not have resulted in the same process. And what we've seen with whistleblowers up until now is that they might say something in public, and rather than follow the line function, which gets you fired. If he had done something meek and mild, he would have been shoved to the side. So that's just an issue to note. I think that it's very important what he did, and that's the reason why we have these inquiries, and the public is now better informed about all the problems that we're seeing, and direct manipulation that begins to answer the question, why was Babita Deokaran's investigation pulled? And I think that we have to look at that type of issue going forward. So, and in terms of IDAC, I think that the IDAC presentation raises a lot of questions, because the key issue that has to be answered is, why was Khumalo arrested? And on what is essentially an HR issue, and why is that a complex crime that IDAC focuses on in a world, in a context in which we are overwhelmed with complex crimes that have been referred to IDAC that they are not following up, at least not in the public eye. But this one they prioritize at the moment that arrests are being made to key members of the Big Five syndicates, Big Five syndicate members. So that is very concerning, because what we're seeing systematically across the board in these in the police structures is a systematic obstruction of justice, and so that question does have to be answered. Did this really have to result in an attack on Khumalo at this stage? And I think that question has to be asked. That doesn't mean that if that appointment was improper, that there shouldn't be a proper process for dealing with it. But was IDAC the body to take this forward? It raises a lot of questions. So I think that I would have a lot of concerns about what are the explanations that were provided for that, because there are many referrals to IDAC that are not necessarily getting the same kind of attention. And that's what I think a lot of members had asked. And it's a really important issue, because we have, it's important to note that government needs to focus on the systemic crimes. That is when ministers are involved in influencing investigations and prosecutions, when members of the executive are being used for cover and are taking bribes. Those are the crimes that IDAC should be focused on. And are they?
Prof. Breakfast, I mean, staying on that IDAC issue and the arrest of General Khumalo, in the General Mkhwanazi's testimony, he spoke about a Brian Parayachi, who was a former crime intelligence officer, who he says had never touched a case docket. And he was apparently involved in the arrest of crime intelligence head Dumsani Khumalo, as well as the other 6 officers that we've seen being arrested. And we heard from the IDAC head saying that Mkhwanazi having accused Parayachi of having access to crime intelligence dockets was actually incorrect. What did you make of that statement, and also just how much the members of parliament were asking with regards to her own relationship with her husband in relation to her job?
Well, I think she cleared the air regarding her relationship with her husband. Of course, whether that is true or not, that's another matter. But, you know, she did respond to that question. But it looks like there has been a cover-up, you know, that has been happening, a cover-up of criminals by security officers who have been on the payroll of criminals. And I think this is one of the issues that needs to be addressed if the country wants to totally overhaul the corruption that embeds itself within these security structures. But I think the questions that arose, I think, were very much irrelevant in terms of the work of the structure.
All right, we do have some engagements from our viewers. We have a couple of WhatsApps that have come through, and we'll start with this first one, and it's from Simpiwe. Simpiwe says, "Evening, Katlego, our country has collapsed as a result of that ANC which claims to have fought for freedom. It's a lie. On the issue of Kachalia, there was no need for him to talk about something he doesn't know. There is nothing good we can expect from him, being Kachalia." And he adds, "No value to police and must be removed as quickly as possible." The next WhatsApp is from Oz. It says, "Good evening, Mrs. Msomi. This gentleman from IDAC who claims he was robbed must not take us for fools. Those gadgets were deliberately gotten rid of, as those contained all of IDAC's devious schemes." All right, so those are your WhatsApp messages this evening. Prof. van den Heever, maybe let's just get your view on that, the latest coming out of that kidnapping and subsequent theft of IDAC's very important gadgets. What did you make of that? Is there any relation to what we heard in the week to what we possibly could see going forward with this particular incident?
It's difficult to tell. I mean, it's a matter that has to be investigated by somebody other than IDAC. You know, you've got Brian Mahotsi suddenly having his car shot up and then disappearing from the scene. All sorts of things like that, which appear to be sort of trying to create a particular kind of narrative. It's not necessarily the case with this IDAC official, but it just means it has to be thoroughly investigated. And yes, the devices and so on being taken, that could be somebody else trying to access those devices, and illicitly, it can also be that somebody's getting rid of devices. I'm not sure that would be an adequate explanation, but I think it's odd.
It certainly does seem. I mean, a lot of people on social media were saying that it's odd. But out of all of this, Sinesipho, is then that of the minister, the suspended minister, the one that's on leave of absence, pardon me, not suspended, Minister Mkhunu, speaking there that he had been denied to his offer to step aside from his ANC duties, saying that the ANC, SG and the NWC were rather saying that he was advised that his special leave pertains to his cabinet responsibilities and that he can continue with his organizational tasks within the movement. What did you make of that?
Well, that story by Times Live Politics editor Lize Katandwa, a lot of people were quite angry at the decision by SG, saying that why couldn't he step aside? He should have stepped aside. And there has been a lot of debate on the step aside, what constitutes a step aside. And one of the debate from the ANC is that you step aside when there is a criminal charge. Right now, there are complaints against Mkhunu, And the argument from ANC members has always been there is no criminal case yet against me. But there's quite a damning allegation linking to Mkhunu. I'll start off with the ANC member, Suleiman Karim. The fact that he told the parliament that he knows Suleiman Karim, that is the man that was paid 1.5 million rand by Vusumuzi Matlala on the 4th of February. And it's also the same man that is linked to Hangwani Maumela. And that evidence is going to be discussed in camera in Madlanga Commission. What Suleiman Karim did was to send the minister a message to say, hey, the man you ordered an investigation on, please delay the investigation because this is our guy. The minister, when he appears in parliament, he acknowledges that he received this message, but then tells parliament that he said he doesn't remember whether or not he responded, but he confirms to have received this message. So that is a direct link. There has been a lot of debate whether or not Mkhunu has been directly linked to the criminal syndicates or, let's say, infiltration into politics and all of that. Karim is a direct link to Mkhunu, but what remains not known is how he responded to Suleiman Karim's request for him to delay investigations. I think maybe the SG might have not made the best decision because the minister is under a lot of cloud right now, and he still has to sort of clear his name. Yeah.
Prof. Breakfast, your take on the ANC and the messaging that this puts out with them saying that Minister Mkhunu can continue with his organizational duties?
I think in teasing out or in unraveling these complexities, we should not omit the political aspect because there have been a number of discourses that have been framed. So on the one hand, you have the Mkhwanazi discourse that, you know, the minister is captured by the Big Five, the minister has been working side by side with criminals. So that is on the one hand. But on the other hand, you have also another discourse that, you know, the reason why General Mkhwanazi laid bare his side of the story was basically to sort of like hamstrung, among other things, Senzo Mkhunu from emerging as someone maybe who could take over the ANC or who could be in the top 7 after the current term of office of the officials of the ANC is over. Right, and therefore, I mean, if the former minister then presented a proposal to the leadership of the ANC that he wants to step aside, the question is why? Why would he do it? Was he trying to project himself as a victim? I think, I mean, the ANC has been trying to be very circumspect here so that it doesn't reinforce a particular narrative that, you know, the former minister is being held back or is being hamstrung or there is politicking here at play. Because my interpretation of the step-aside principle is that you must be formally charged, and that has not happened as yet. So why then would you want him to, not to say that you are downplaying the seriousness of these allegations,
right?
But yeah.
All right, Prof, let's hold it right there. Let's go for a quick ad break. We will continue to round up some of our top stories from the previous week, so do stay with us. All right, we're rounding up the hour, taking a look at the big stories of the past 7 days with our panel of experts. So, Professor van den Heever, we saw that out-of-court settlement of the Please Call Me saga with the inventor, Nkosana Makate. Was this expected?
Well, I think it's been a sort of protracted struggle that's probably been damaging to both parties, and I think they wanted to put a line under it. But obviously, there was a kind of a final threat made to the one party that made them actually finally just end this whole saga. But I think that everybody is. I think it looks as though there's a reasonably just settlement at the end of the day that ends it. But and it has always been a question as to whether or not he was asking for too much, and whether or not that was adequate or legitimate. But it appears there was legitimacy on the one side to saying he should have been compensated. The question really was how much, and I think now we have a settlement, and it's probably all fair on all sides at this point.
We certainly do hope so, Sinesipho. I mean, you're a journalist at Business Day. Maybe you have some insight as to that. How much is that settlement? Everyone has been making all these calculated estimations as to, could it be 200 million? Could it be anything towards $500 million? Do you have any inclination?
Well, everyone has been trying to look into it. If it was in court papers, I would have it for you. But in this case, the estimation has been that it's almost around 800 million, but I think it's almost 1 billion rand.
Sure, that's laughing all the way to the bank this festive season. But many are expecting that when we do get the results or the interim results for Vodacom, we could possibly have a glimpse into what that amount could be. Prof, Breakfast, we also heard from Donald Trump this past few days saying that there definitely will not be a U.S. delegation to the G20 because of the what Afrikaners in South Africa are facing. What did you make of this? Was this expected? I mean, at some point, we thought that maybe there would be 1 or 2 members of his cabinet that would be sent to South Africa for this delegation, and now no one's coming from the US.
No, to be honest, I was not taken aback by that. I saw it coming. I think he has been on a mission to frame a discourse that does not exist, that there is a violation of human rights of the Afrikaners. And actually what this means is that even the delegation that was sent to the US in the beginning of the year, all those efforts, they fall away, because you can see that this person is hell-bent to peddle these lies. And it looks like, you know, the way things are, this is going to continue up until his term of office is over, that as a country we are going to cross swords with his administration, that he says that we were not even up to scratch to host G20, that is not going to send any of his officials to come down here. It's really quite sad, you know. And yeah, I mean, I think the country should be very strategic in terms of joining forces with other like-minded countries and try to explore other avenues in terms of how we can leverage on other partnerships, because it looks like, you know, the tension bilaterally between us and the US is really going to exist so long as Trump is still the president of the US.
Prof, and Heever, do you think that there could be anything beyond this political rhetoric? I mean, beyond the increasing of tariffs, beyond the case against Israel by South Africa at the ICJ, could there be more to this that Trump is really trying to attain out of this narrative?
Invariably. I mean, there's obviously it's a completely inconsistent narrative. I mean, the US in the past, historically, and the Trump administration in particular, have never really given a damn about human rights in any country, and have a whole lot of relationships, very particular relationships, and also family relationships in the case of the Trump administration with countries that quite publicly violate human rights. So I don't think that really is a sound argument, but basically within the realm of creating leverage for some sort of bilateral quid pro quo, yeah, that's quite plausible, and that's probably what it's about. And the question really is, what's the conversation there? What are they trying to excise out of South Africa? What do they want? And it can be that it relates to the International Court of Justice against the Israel. I mean, that's been a particular issue. The Trump administration has absolutely no concern about the massive human rights violations happening in Israel, and then appear to use similar language as if South Africa is embarking on the same course. So yeah, it doesn't make sense, but essentially it's a very transactional government, and also potentially, and on the face of it, a very corrupt government. So you don't quite know everything that people are asking for, but obviously there are particular interests that operate through Trump that might want something out of South Africa, and then there are some things that might be of special interest to the United States, such as mineral deals, etc. But who knows? But essentially, South Africa does need to look carefully at this, because its international relationships, including future relationships with the United States, not necessarily a Trump administration, have to be taken into consideration, and one doesn't want to burn all those bridges, but you do want to build up leverage and make sure that you're properly underwritten within the international context, and that's going to be the careful balancing act that South Africa has to look at going forward.
Most certainly. Sinesipho, bringing it back home, we do have the Kampepe Commission that's set to begin tomorrow. Any other big stories that we could look forward to in this coming week?
I think the Kampepe Commission is going to be quite interesting. President Cyril Ramaphosa recently lost that court case, the urgent application for him not to pay 168 million rand to the families of victims of apartheid murders. The other thing that would be interesting to watch out for is the medium-term policy budget that's going to be delivered in Parliament on Wednesday. That's going to be quite interesting, especially amid the developments in the United States. That's quite interesting.
All right. Thank you so much to our panel this evening for sharing with us some of your insights with regards to the top stories. We certainly are going to be looking forward to that Kampepe Commission, as you mentioned, Sinesipho, and of course what will be coming out of the Madlanga Commission as well as the ad hoc committee. Thank you so much for joining us. That was our panel this evening. Wits School of Governance Professor Alex van den Heever, as well as Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who is a political analyst, and Sinesipho Schrieber, who is a business day journalist.